Hello, hello. This is OverDrive on TSN Radio, 1050, and the iHeartRadio app. My name is not Brian Hayes. My name is Brendan Dunlop. Pleasure to be in the TSN Radio studios alongside Dave Feschuk. It's the easy tell that it's the All-Star break season. The boys are away. We know what they're doing. They're absolutely golfing. But I'm thrilled, buddy, to have my first opportunity on the three-letter on television alongside you, someone I've read and worked with a little bit, but never spoken to as long as we'll get to today.
Yeah, great to be here. Home run derby night.
Yes.
So I'm excited for that. Most people are not excited for that, I've come to realize.
Yeah, it seems, and it's a growing trend, though, right? I think for us baseball guys, if you fell in love with baseball in the 80s or in the 90s, there was something nice about the break. There wasn't so much competition for your attention in life, let alone in sports. Now that there is, it just feels more interruptive and it feels more gimmicky, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's gimmicky and it's hokey and it's silly, but I still like it. I almost, this probably sounds stupid because I used to love the All-Star game. I used to think it was like the best All-Star game, and it may still be because it's not exactly, a roaring competition here. Like the Pro Bowl's nothing. The NHL All-Star game, they've turned it into a 3-on-3 tournament at times. The NBA, it's just a score fest. They don't even play any defense. Yeah. So they actually pitch the balls, and they actually hit the balls. I think it's a pretty good All-Star game, but I almost think like tonight is taken over tomorrow in terms of the marquee event, in my view, anyways. And Vladdy being there from a Toronto perspective probably adds to that for me.
When you have the stars that baseball has now, the guys that mash like Aaron Judge, like Mike Trout, like Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Pete Alonso, when this event comes around, that's what makes it super exciting. And baseball, unlike the other sports, hasn't been able to capitalize on the energy and the star power as well as these other sports have. So it's in a good way, especially as someone who wants to see baseball continue to grow or continue to stay relevant in a very competitive age. It's good that people care about the home run derby right now. I just wonder how many people are.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see. But hey, I was excited to be on the show with you today because last night, driving home from a family event, I'm getting updates from the back seat. My son's tuning into this Gold Cup match.
It's streaming on the phone in the back seat of the car.
This Canada-USA thing. And it's like, oh no, Canada's going to lose. Down 1-0 in the 88th minute. Wait a second. No, they tied it up in the 93rd minute. No, wait a second. No, they're down. Own goal. They're down 2-1. No, wait a second. Tied it up. Oh, sorry. No, they got up 2-1.
Yeah.
Then they got down. Anyway,
crazy
flip-flop.
It was a roller coaster, man.
How wild was this match? I didn't get a chance to watch it. I saw the highlights, but I know you were riveted.
I would say to you, that's 88 minutes of your life that you didn't waste.
Okay.
Because for the first 88 minutes, or maybe 85 to be fair, it was not a very competitive game. But when Canada and the U.S. play each other in any sport, at some point, there's almost always something that's electric and must see. And thankfully, for those people that had invested as much time as they did in that match, the extra time and penalties, it was enthralling. And it was it's disappointing that Canada came up short. This is such a interesting tournament. The Gold Cup in general is very much, I think, for hockey fans, I say the equivalent of like the World Hockey Championships. Mm-hmm. You'll get a handful of guys, you're like, this guy's a superstar. But it really isn't like that. It's not the best on best. And in terms of Canada and the United States preparing to host in 2026, all of these moments are building moments where they don't need the superstars. They're looking to see who else is in the pipeline. It's all in preparation. And someone as meticulous and methodical as John Herdman, as much as he would have loved to have had Alphonso Davies and Jonathan David, and as much as that would have given them a better chance to win a major trophy for the first time in 23 years, he really enjoys, I think, like having had this experience. No one thought that they would give the U.S. the game that they did and be that close. And if you had told anyone that they would take the U.S. to penalties and probably have deserved to win, even though they were outshot, they would have snapped your hand off for them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Crazy game. So, and I guess, so in your mind, like, what did you see? Like, did you see guys out there that were like, 2026, we got a guy? Or is it like a bunch of decent guys? There's no heir apparent to Jonathan Davies. And Jonathan David and Alphonso Davies is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Or is there?
What's exciting is that I think you're going to see some players step into roles that maybe weren't even in this tournament that can be as impactful as some of those guys were in World Cup qualifying to get to Qatar.
Okay.
Ali Ahmed, a guy from Vancouver. He's plays for the Vancouver Whitecaps, actually from Toronto. His first camp, his first opportunity really with the national team, kind of came out of nowhere, was incredible, like undroppable. John Herdman had to use this guy on the left side, and he was just exceptional. Jacob Schaffelberg is a guy who played in Toronto. at TFC and was shipped out of town to make room for some bigger pieces and some more expensive players that play on the wing. And he was exceptional running down the side. He
scored a huge goal.
Scored a great goal, his first for his country. I love seeing that too when it's young guys that have, the odds are a bit against them. When you're a Canadian guy, even playing in Major League Soccer, there's always someone more attractive, more appealing, perceived to contribute, be able to contribute more than you, that oftentimes you get moved out for. And that's what happened to Schaffelberg. But he's become a star in Nashville. I think John Herdman is someone who recognizes the talent there and gave him the opportunity. Wow. Has so much belief in the guy. And you just to see that come through in a major tournament, for a soccer fan, that's exciting, man. Okay,
so the question is, though, so you're up 2-1 in the 109th minute.
Yeah.
Is there any way you should lose that match?
It's just it's unfortunate the way the goal happened. The U.S. had taken a shot. Dane Sinclair, who's become the number one for Canada, at least in this tournament, he's definitely going to be the number one going forward. Milan Borjan is 36. It's time to hang him up. A lot of people were very happy to see Dane Sinclair in there. Mm-hmm. Shot comes off of him, and the defender, Scott Kennedy, who'd only been on the field for extra time, just wrong place at the wrong time. Off him helplessly. He could do nothing about it. Sinclair could do nothing about it. It's in the back of the net, and it goes to penalties, which are always a crapshoot, right? It's always roulette penalties. And it really is the most painful way to lose. Yeah. I don't get too worked up, that fan worked up anymore for a lot of sports, but I smacked the table.
Right.
I smacked the table with a couple of penalty saves. And certainly with that goal as well, because I think I felt like they were winning in extra time or they were losing in penalties. And they lost in penalties.
Okay, this was another example, though. You're a soccer guy. I've covered soccer. I've been to a World Cup. I've covered the Olympic tournaments. I've been lucky to see some great soccer, and I love watching soccer. When it's World Cup, when it's Euros, I will be an absolute addict for those fortnights, whatever it is, the month that they're on.
You dig in.
I dig in, but I don't know the game like guys like you know the game. Here's the thing that bothers me about last night is like the game reports are Canada up 2-1 and then choke it up with an own goal.
Right.
To make it 2-2 and put it into penalties. And the own goal, they name the guy who scores the own goal, Scott Kennedy. In in hockey, if it goes in off your shin pad and you're in an own goal situation, they give credit to the guy who last touched it from the other team, right? You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. In soccer, they say, no. It wasn't the other. It wasn't. They didn't score. The U.S. didn't score. Canada scored on itself. How do you feel about that?
There's a lot of things that they do in soccer that seem complicated and seem like it's just the way it's always been. I definitely notice it when it comes to covering North American sports. And in our job, especially when you go back and forth with both, I got to a point where I realized I've been so soccer for so long, and I probably work with more actual English people sometimes than people who grew up on North American sports in Canada.
Right.
That it's changed my lingo. Yeah. Like when a hockey player scores 2 goals and I go, Alex DeBrincat, he's on a hat trick. And I go, that's not how people speak about hockey.
Right.
2 goals is not on a hat trick. It means he's got 2 goals, and if he gets a third, it's a hat trick.
Right.
But in English soccer,
you will say on a hat trick.
On a hat trick is someone who has scored 2 goals.
So you're on the verge of a hat trick.
That's exactly where it comes from.
So, but I'm saying like Scott Kennedy is in these game reports as though like he didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
Like he was just standing there, the ball goes off him.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what he could have done differently. Am I wrong?
He could have done, there was nothing different. He knew nothing about it. The only thing he could have done differently was to have been 3 feet away or 3 feet to the left and not have been as unfortunately in the line of that shot, which I think came off of Gianluca Busio. The thing that's so frustrating about this, and everyone wants to use it as a measuring stick, there's an asterisk next to this anyway, because the U.S. have a B and a C squad, and Canada have a B squad. There's a handful of guys that played at the World Cup and would be regulars. Richie Larea, who Toronto FC was supposedly trying to get back, his loan expired. So if you thought things were rough for TFC now, it's going to get even worse when you lose a key piece like that. I mean,
can it get worse?
It can get worse. Okay. Yeah. I mean, this is Toronto. Like, look at I think every team in this city can go through a cycle like that where you say this has got to be the lowest, and then it gets worse. It gets lower. TFC are sadly in a real spot like that. But on the national team, Richie Larea, wherever he's playing, he's still got a few years to contribute. Should be a key piece of 2026 and certainly a veteran. Jonathan Osorio. There's guys that are hardened veterans on that team. Steven Vittoria, who scored the penalty. You don't have central defenders taking penalty kicks. This guy in Portugal has become a penalty kick phenom.
Right.
He scored the one to get it to extra time. Then he took the first penalty as the captain in the penalty shootout. And Matt Turner, who plays for Arsenal, the U.S. keeper, stood his ground. You never see keepers like stay in the middle. But that's what Vitória did on his first shot, powered it through. And he gambled that he'd do it again, and he did. And Canada, from the opening shot, which was saved, never felt like they had a chance in that shootout. That's how momentum works in shootouts.
It's crazy. Eh?
Yeah,
Do you like the like? I've heard people say it's just a lottery. I think there's a lot more than a lottery going on there because it's such a mental thing. But
do you think it's very different in deciding a soccer match on penalties? It's much different than deciding a hockey game in a penalty shootout?
I don't know. I just feel like the soccer one is more of like a mental grind. Like it's like a chess match more than hockey. Because hockey, like you make your move, you shoot it. You know, sometimes it goes off the bar, sometimes it goes in. You know, good players can miss. Great player. There's been great players who were terrible at breakaways. Wayne Gretzky comes to mind.
Sure.
You know, and we obviously have a checkered history in the shootout in Canada, with going back to '98 and Nagano and the Olympics and all that. But I just feel like there's something kind of intriguing about soccer because you're supposed to score, right? Like it's an 80%. It's like free throws in basketball, basically.
The pressure is not on the goalkeeper, whereas in hockey, the pressure is on the goaltender.
Yeah, exactly. In a lot of ways. And so I think because you're supposed to score, because it should be easy, because the net is so gosh darn big and the goalie is so small comparatively, like it puts so much pressure on the shooters, right? And you just see choke job after choke job.
Yeah, you do.
Like, for lack of a better term, that's certainly the way a lot of people perceive it. Now, I understand there's more to it than that, but at its heart, I think it is like a mental chess game. Because
we don't see it as often in decisive moments in hockey, there is more of a strategy to it, and it's just so much more part of the fabric, I think, of soccer in terms of deciding it, that you do kind of scheme and plan and prep for it in ways that you just don't in hockey the same way. But you're right that, there's breakaway guys that you wouldn't want to see as the last shooter. For John Herdman, what was unfortunate with the timing is he had two of his better goal scorers just off at that point. The game management to get through, to make sure that you were in a position to get to penalties. Junior Hoylett couldn't stay on the pitch. Lucas Cavallini on the yellow card couldn't stay on the pitch. Yeah. So those are some of the moves you got to make. All right. Did Herdman, Herdman's been taking some heat for. It has been a lot. His especially tactics. In the Prince circles. Yeah. Now, where are you on that? Are you like, did he, last night, were there criticisms to be leveled at the head coach for not nursing that 2-1 lead late in the game home? Not to mention, what was it? Yeah, they were up 2-1, right? So they were up 2-1, but they weren't, they weren't in control. It wasn't as though that it was a dominating performance. They wouldn't have been unfair winners had it ended 2-1, but it wasn't really their match to win. It was almost as if you just felt like the U.S. were going to keep knocking on the door. And on paper, they were a better team. They had a lot of momentum. They've got pieces that Canada don't have. Jesus Ferreira from FC Dallas has scored back-to-back hat tricks in the group stage, albeit against St. Kitts and Nevis and Trinidad and Tobago, but could fill the back of the net, whereas Canada had struggled to do that in this tournament. Right. So he didn't get it wrong tactically in this tournament. It was with the star players, with the trophy on the line, with the pressure in Las Vegas at the Nations League final 3 weeks ago. That's where I think he probably overthought it, and given the chance of the mulligan to go back and replay that whole game again, I think he would do a lot of things differently. Mm-hmm. So I understand where the criticism comes from. The expectation has been raised, right? And that's kind of the exciting part. And he says this, and I do believe this. Sometimes I think it's a distraction when he says it in the media, but this is what we want for the program. Yeah. Get to a point where you have expectations and there is criticism. This is a normal kind of soccer space that just hasn't existed in this Canadian soccer circle or space because it hasn't been competitive. Right. But I hope that the fact that we've been on OverDrive talking about soccer for as long as we had, and we'll get into it with Matthew Scianitti in the next block, TSN Soccer reporter, I hope that this carries over, that there's a buzz and excitement for the Women's World Cup, man. Yeah. Because Canada are a very good team. They are in a position to do something special in Australia. They're motivated to do so. They carry a lot of pressure on themselves and put a lot of pressure on themselves to outperform what everyone thinks they can do, and certainly what the Federation has kind of put in front of them, or how the Federation has prepared them or not prepared them. Wow. They really want to show that they can win, and they want to do it for Christine Sinclair, and that's a motivated team. And in any sport, when you have a team with multiple motivations like that, I think you're afraid of that team.
Well,
that's not someone you want to run into.
Well, they're not exactly underdogs considering they are the defending Olympic gold medalists.
The thing that makes the Women's World Cup so different is that you're not playing all of the best teams in the world in the Olympics. So you do get a couple of the best teams from Europe. You do get, Australia has been competitive in the Olympics, but they do benefit from the fact that you don't have 12 European teams.
Right.
And now, especially with the money that's been invested in women's soccer in Europe and these traditional soccer places, those countries are so much better, and they got good really fast. And that's why the World Cup has been a hurdle for Canada. So, this is kind of, and the women's players talking about it a lot. Janine Becky, who'll be on the TSN broadcast throughout the tournament. Unfortunately, not on the pitch, but for us, the viewer, fortunately, she'll be on the broadcast panel at least.
Yeah, we had her in here the other day, Brendan, and she was great.
She's amazing.
She was great at the Men's World Cup on the panel.
Phenomenal. But the warning that they give, right, it's the pipeline, it's the program, it's the future. Here we are celebrating the fact that soccer matters and it's on this upward trajectory. But if we don't do the right things and the crystal ball, you look down at how the work is being laid, the road is being paved. It's not being paved the right way.
Right.
It's certainly not being paved as efficiently as it is in other countries and as effectively. That's going to catch up.
And basketball is a good kind of bellwether for that. Like, just because, you're supposed to be good, you've got a lot of talent. And we've been talking about the golden generation of Canadian basketball for quite a few years here.
I know.
Still can't qualify for an Olympics.
I know.
Losing to Czech Republic, Thomas Satoransky torching you last time they tried to qualify for the Olympics. Look, they're going to go to a World Cup, a FIBA World Cup this summer and attempt to do what they haven't been able to do since the days of Steve Nash. But to your point, you can have all the pieces. Canada's got more than enough talent to be a basketball world power, just like it's got more than enough talent to do what it's never done before in the FIFA world. But it doesn't mean it's going to happen if you don't do it right.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes for a busy schedule, right? Soccer is all the time. Basketball is kind of becoming that. And I mean, for a global market, which basketball is always trying to appeal to, and is what makes it arguably maybe the second biggest sport in the world behind soccer, because it has that global reach. I do wonder, though, if filling up the calendar and eating so much of the year will work against the NBA.
Yeah.
Summer League, for example, I think it's phenomenal to get people excited for the season, to showcase these young stars, to have an event that the NBA community gets excited about. People love to go to Vegas.
Yeah.
And then you have a summer in August. But then in this year where you have a World Cup, where next season is going to creep up very quickly, especially in this market in Toronto with the Raptors, with the overhaul they've had. There's not really a summer break. This is not that year where you get to take your foot off the gas.
You're right.
Right? And so I'm interested to see how busy of a year it is for basketball in general, and where that kind of leaves people's appetites.
Yeah, to your point, you talk about having B and C squads for the U.S. and Canada last night in soccer. Guess what? The U.S. is not sending an A squad to the FIBA World Cup. It's a bunch of who's he play for? Because it ain't LeBron, it ain't Kevin Durant. It's not the best of the best for the United States. It's a lot of guys who are good players, who are legit NBA stars, but not superstars.
No, not superstars. That's what I think baseball got right with the World Baseball Classic. But I don't know how much Major League Baseball had to do with that. I think it's the international players. It's the pride that they have for their countries. It's the passion that their countries have to treat the World Baseball Classic like a FIFA World Cup. That's what made it so cool. And this year in particular, I think this was the first time the World Baseball Classic really mattered. Really captivated, right?
I mean, the way Japan, there was so much drama.
Yeah.
It was great stuff.
It was fun. It was exciting. And then for the first time, really, the American team also, I think, captivated a lot of people.
Yeah.
And made highlights worth watching.
Right.
Which you just haven't had in previous World Baseball.
Yeah, you're right. It has to matter to the players.
Yeah. You got to have the stars.
Got to matter.
Except in the situation that we're in today, where Noodles and O-Dog and the A's, you can do without them, and you can deal with us. Don't need the stars today. Let them have their vacation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They need their time. Load management for those guys is very important. They drive themselves hard, as we know.
What do you think the FanDuel odds would be on O-Dog being on the green right now? Or is he more of a morning guy?
Oh, from my understanding, and I do not keep track of the O-Dog's movements. Nobody does. I'm sure O-Dog does what O-Dog does, but my understanding, knowing the golf world as I do, that he's the first tee time every time. And he plays fast, and you'll never see him if you're not in the group. And even if you are in the group and You happen to lose a golf ball, misplace a club. He's gone. He's moving ahead, Brendan. So
the odds -800 that he would be on the green at any one point when you bring it up.
At this time of day, I think the O-Dogs, this is probably nap time.
Nap time. I wouldn't have guessed him to be a morning guy, though.
Oh, yeah?
I think I would have gone the opposite side on those odds, yeah.
The one thing about O-Dog, we've had this discussion over the years, is that he's like me. Like, he's a very good golfer, and I'm a very poor golfer. So we're very different that way. But we're the same on one thing. We're both fast golfers. And I'm a poor golfer, but I'm not going to hold you up.
Right.
There's nothing I hate more, and I think O-Dog would probably share this. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think I've gleaned this from him. Nothing worse than slow golf, man.
Oh.
You don't need to read the putt from 15 different angles. This is not the PGA Tour. Hit the freaking ball and move on.
The practice swings, the reads, the sizing it up. Come on.
Looking for the ball in the forest. If it's in the forest, leave it in the forest. Drop another one. On you go.
On you go. Yeah. That's got to be one of the most annoying people to come across in the summer is that person on the golf course that is treating it like the PGA. Like, well, I paid my green fee. I'm just going to take as many practice swings. And if you are a fast golfer, like you and O-Dog must be in the minority of golfers out there being fast.
Well, and that's partly because that's why he, like first tee time's the best tee time because then there's nobody in front of you, right? Like I don't mind getting up early if it means the round will be over in 3 hours instead of 5. And you can get it if you play golf at this time around the GTA, especially on the weekend, you're looking at the 5.5 hour golf round. I mean, which is unacceptable. Right. Should not happen, and yet does happen. Because people just do not understand that they're not on the PGA Tour. They should not be taking 15 different practice swings. They should not be analyzing putts, within an inch of their life. There needs to be a shot clock, but there is no shot clock. People need to have their own shot clock, Brendan, but they don't.
People don't. People just don't care, man.
No.
I've really enjoyed getting to know you in this first block of the show because I realized we could take the conversation anywhere. Like where I want to take it right now is if you are a morning guy, how much it bugs you professionally and personally being a fan when your team is playing West Coast and when you have to cover a game that is in a different time zone than you are used to. Like in Qatar, the game's kicked off at 10 p.m., which as a night guy, I always did the night
You're a
highlight
night guy.
show.
You're good.
I'm still kind of in that space. When I wrote Dwayne De Rosario's book, I wrote 90% of it between the hours of 2 and 9 a.m.
Did you really?
Which is not something I anticipated.
Wow.
I don't know if you kind of get that itch to write in the middle of the night. I don't know if it's just the house being quiet, if it's I just get in the groove, but I realize now that the brain is firing at that time.
Okay.
So if I don't get to bed before like 11 or 12, I'm liable to be up till 3 or 4.
Is that right?
I find something to do, read, write, something entertainment to consume. Usually it's work. I'm not that person watching Netflix at 2 in the morning.
Okay.
But when the games were late in Qatar, these 10 p.m. kickoffs, man, that kicked my butt.
Did it?
I did not anticipate that because I'm a night guy.
Yeah.
But it was just different. Going to bed at 4 a.m., by the time you finish working, by the time you commute, you got to get something to eat, find something to eat. Yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah, I'm a total morning guy, which when you cover sports, obviously you have to stay out to a certain time. And look, I'm an afternoon nap guy. If I got a
big
late
afternoon
game,
nap guy.
If I got a late game, I've turned into I got that player routine where I'm shutting it down for 45 minutes in the afternoon to build up the steam to cover a late game. But speaking of the West Coast, there's no better place to be a sports fan than the West Coast because the games are over so early, right?
Yes.
You get that 4 p.m. Eastern game, then you're watching 7 to 10. You're in bed by 10. Even if you love sports to the point where you got to watch every game, you don't have to stay up late. Love it.
But don't you feel bad for the people that have like 9 to 5 jobs when their team is playing on the East Coast and it's like 4:30? Like how much do you really consume it?
I mean, I hear I've been to Vancouver with the Leafs over the years, and they always complain
about the early game that they're
the
forced
4 p.m.
to
start because it's Toronto, so we got to start at 4 p.m. We can't start at a normal time. We have to start at their time. There's a massive resentment about that out there, especially when it comes to Vancouver, Toronto.
Of course.
But you know what? You go to like California, it's an early morning culture, man. It's like fitness culture. It's like you get up at 5 a.m. in California, like there's a lot of people up at 5 a.m. working out, there's a lot of people on the roads at 5 a.m. because a lot of their businesses are based kind of on the Eastern clock a little bit, right? So it's a morning culture, man.
I've always felt like I'd be the odd man out in California, and you've just confirmed it for me.
Okay.
You've just confirmed it.
All right.
And soccer at 7 a.m.
You won't be on Muscle Beach at 5 a.m.
I tell you, buddy, I definitely need to do some muscle workouts. I don't have the confidence to be on Muscle Beach, but we'll see. After a few of these shows, we'll see. Maybe. Yeah. You're listening or watching OverDrive on TSN. It will continue. We'll talk some more soccer with Matthew Scianitti. We'll talk a little baseball with Steve Phillips. Ian Mendez will join us as the Ottawa Senators have made a big trade. And we'll also get into some tennis with Mark Rowe. This is OverDrive on the TSN network. You're listening to OverDrive, or you're watching OverDrive. My name is Brendan Dunlop, filling in for Brian Hayes. Happy to be alongside Dave Feschuk today as we talk about all sports. I love how we took the first block and made it as soccer heavy as we did, as if there wasn't another soccer segment coming up. This is usually like what I do. I often wonder this. When you go into other settings, do you feel as though the suits maybe give like a warning to the people you're working with? Like I've always wondered if the like producers are like, hey, Dunlop, really good, fun, enjoy the show, but big soccer guy, like just pull it back a little bit. Like,
right.
Well, he's going to ask for 2-3 guests. Like just give it one guest.
You know what? My thing though with soccer on this particular moment, like we're talking Canada soccer, right? Like if we're talking TFC and how bad they are, maybe you got to watch that. Like there might be the appetite for that might not be that huge. But in my as I was telling you, like I'm not a soccer maniac, but when it comes to international soccer, I certainly care about it. And when it comes to Canada soccer, now that we're at this sort of unprecedented moment where we have this incredible collection of talent, like I'm intensely interested, and I think a lot of people are intensely interested in seeing. Can they bring this thing across the line? You know, can they actually take this great generation of players and turn it into something in 2026 when Canada will be among the hosts in this 3-nation World Cup?
Perfect setup for our next guest, someone who went to the World Cup to watch this team in Qatar, covered this team in this lead up to this point where, the men are competitive and do have expectation. It's TSN's football guy, both brands. Matthew Scianitti joins us on OverDrive. Scianitti, what's up, man?
Feschuk, I'll remind you, you did cover TFC in those early days of the franchise. I remember that. No,
yes, I did.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you. Boys.
He's tried to block those out of his mind. Why are you bringing those up, man?
Haven't we all, boys? Haven't we all?
We're living those again, Scianitti. We're living those times watching TFC again. But at least the national team gives us moments, right? That's what Dave and I were talking about. That's this compelling team, even in this scenario of the Gold Cup where if you're really in it and you're curious to see these new players and curious to see how Herdman schemes things and works these young guys, even if you're not that in it, like you're going up against the United States. And if you have a chance to beat them and knock them out of a tournament that they are hosting, like the country cares. And I think last night for 85 minutes, that game was a bit of a snoozer. We're not getting those 85 minutes of our life back. I'm really glad, Scianitti, that they made it up with the final few moments of regulation and extra time, and then penalties the way it went. Sucks for Canada, but the fact that it was a compelling game leaves us with a lot to talk about.
Yeah, it certainly does. And when I look at Herdman and I watch him throughout the game, you can take a barometer of the energy level when you see how engaged he is with his players. And there are certain things that John Herdman does throughout a game, bringing his players in, doing kind of a vibe check with them and adjusting his tactics. But I always am very keen at what he says after the game because I believe we've come to a point with John Herdman where he's having a challenge, not necessarily with talent in certain positions. Moise Babito, Ali Ahmed, Zach McGraw, Jacob Schaffelberg, Jason Russell-Rowe, they all played very well. When you go to that first game against Guadeloupe and a lot of eyebrows were raised because it was 2-2 and, unfortunately Jason Russell-Rowe concedes a late own goal and lots of questions given, where everyone expects Canada to be. The fact is John Herdman was trying to onboard a lot of young talent. And in a crucial moment against the United States, not a full-strength United States, mind you, the Canadians really comported them or really showed themselves very well. Now, afterwards, the one thing that John Herdman has been talking about is fight. He wants to bring back this sense of fight in this team. And I don't call it a shot necessarily, but for him to say something to the effect of what we've learned is that there's depth here and, that this group, they're going to make sure there's no complacency between the group that we have at the Gold Cup and the group that isn't here, that they can't sit in their silk pajamas and just, coast until, the next 2-3 years. When I talk about messaging, Herdman is trying to find, a way to get that brotherhood and that fight. But the thing is, especially to your point, Dave, trying to get across the line and trying to win games like this, trying to win trophies. Canada, pound for pound, tactically, when it comes to their attacking talent, has as good, if not better, a talent than the United States. And I say that and I don't hedge it, because when you look at what's going on with Christian Pulisic and the issues that he had leaving Chelsea, Canada does not have those issues. Their top players, Alphonso Davies, Stephen Eustáquio, Alistair Johnston, Tajon Buchanan, they are valuable where they play, and they will play in the Champions League likely next year and start. So John Herdman right now is looking at depth in positions that he already has top talent and trying to have messaging where he's trying to build back that fight. But the fact is, they need a win-at-all-costs mentality. And, you know, Amy Walsh, our soccer analyst, was speaking earlier today about moral victories. We're getting to a point where moral victories just don't matter with this men's national team.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my thing. Like last night, you know, you have this incredible, you know, run in the end. You're down 1-0. You tie it with Vittorio's penalty. You get up 2-1 with Schaffelberg's great goal down the left side. And then at that point, Scianitti, like, how much is that on the coach? How much is that on tactics? Or how much is that on just the team's general comportment that you cannot take a 2-1 advantage at that point in the game in the 109th minute and somehow get that across the line? Like, is that not unacceptable not to be able to do that?
The one thing, you know, Dave, that's very interesting now about John Herdman is that he is expressing in media conferences how he's hearing criticism in the media of his team. I don't think anyone is directly criticizing the value and talent that he has and the undeniable fact that John Herdman has recruited not only on the men's team, but on the women's team, some of the best talent that have ever played soccer in this country. Mm-hmm. But we are at a point where it is fair to go ahead and criticize, nitpick, evaluate, you know, express an opinion about that this team in some very key moments, and not just last night's game, but I look at the CONCACAF Nations League final, knowing that Canada fielded its full-strength squad, that they weren't able to go ahead and win in those big moments. Now, certainly, John Herdman is a guy who rallies around his guys, who goes ahead and says and makes sure that his guys have a siege mentality. But we're getting to a point, irrespective of what's going on with the association, and Jason DeVos talking about whether they are looking into options, if they have to go into bankruptcy or not. This team, the men's team at this point, has not hit that one marker that John Herdman says is the next big objective, which is winning a trophy. And the United States is in their way. And as I said, Canada has as good attacking talent as the United States has. But when you ask Christine Sinclair, and I know, Brendan, you've spoken to Dwayne DiRosario about this, and Julian de Guzman has said it, the Americans are obsessed with winning. They are obsessed with it. And you could see it last night, even in the video of the Americans apparently, so it goes, taunting the Canadians, and that's starting a brouhaha in front of the Americans' dressing room. They are obsessed with it. Now, John Herdman, as I said, is trying to balance between coaxing this young talent that he has and trying to, you know, not appease, but make sure that the guys who are playing in Europe in the Champions League are still invested in it. But perhaps the challenge is trying to lean into a bit of cockiness and arrogance so that his guys know when they go to those big moments, no. It doesn't matter if you're the United States or Mexico. We're going to win because we expect to win.
The biggest difference between that game against the U.S. last night in Cincinnati and the Nations League final in Las Vegas, to me, the eye test was fight. The Stars, the 8th team, didn't have that fight, man. They knew that they had lost that game to the U.S. probably when the second goal went in, maybe before. Whereas I think for 120 minutes, particularly as Canada was finally the beneficiary of some luck, which doesn't happen in CONCACAF. There was a blatant handball. They should have been awarded a penalty in the first half. They weren't given it. The same American defender, Miles Robinson, handled the ball again. They went to VAR again. This time, it wasn't as clear, but they gave it this time. That was Vittoria's penalty. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They had a bit of luck, and I felt like this team really showed that, you know, they don't need the star guys to have this fight and this mentality, Scianitti, you're talking about.
But here's my counterpoint to that, Brendan. If you are going to then say that there was that fight out of the Jacob Schaffelbergs and the Russell Rose and the McGraths and the Ahmeds and the Babitos, who are all talented in their own right, but you know, the other part of John Herdman's messaging is he's talked about having his guys in the top leagues in Europe. And the guys who are in the top leagues in Europe, unfortunately, are not those guys. And if the Schaffelbergs and the Andres Brims are starting ahead of Alistair Johnston or Tajon Buchanan or Sam Adekubi or Kyle Larin, that will become an issue because it then becomes an issue of not just, okay, there's not necessarily fight from those guys in amongst the European teams, but is that not then an indictment on the head coach that he's not getting those fight out of those guys? This is what I mean. Like, And the greater issue here, I mean, this is really getting inside the men's national team, and I love what we're talking about. It is. Herdman also talked about how much he relies on veterans like Steve Vittoria. Steve Vittoria, stepped up, took a huge penalty late on to tie the game after Vasquez scores for the United States. Well, Steve Vittoria is 36 years old, and he plays in the center back position. And as much as we have amazing attacking talent, and if the game of soccer was only comprised of guys who play left wing back and right wing back, then Canada would be among the top 25 nations in the world. But it is all 11 guys, and they have a defensive problem. And let's call it an issue. And John Herdman undoubtedly knows it because he's a master recruiter of talent. If you are then relying on guys who are going to give you fight, irrespective of their age or where they play, and you're then having to sideline the top guys because you don't think they give you as much fight as these other guys, I think you have to look in the mirror as a head coach and say, what am I not doing to get the best out of my best guys?
Yeah, all great points there, Scianitti. I'm going to veer off track here with one of my pet peeves about soccer. We were talking about it in the first segment. Many of soccer terminology points always kind of, stick in my craw. Like people say, we need to get a result. But guess what? A loss is still a result. You see what I'm saying? But the one that was the sort of, forefront last night was the own goal. It's this poor guy, Scott Kennedy, Canadian defender, standing in front of his own net. Ball goes off him into the Canadian net to tie the game, and they lose on penalties. And suddenly it's his fault because it's his own goal. Now, hockey does it a different way, right? If you're the doofus defenseman who's, picking his nose in front of the net and the puck goes off your butt into the net, your own net, they give the goal very graciously to the last guy that touched it on the other team, Scianitti. So who has it right? Should soccer be blaming people who have nothing to do with goals as their own goal, or does hockey have it right by being a little kinder and saying, you know what, it wasn't his fault, let's give it to the guy who last touched it?
Yeah, I won't make your eyes turn in your head either, Dave. When now they're talking about things like expected goals and XG and expected assists.
Let's take them down that
expected own goals. Do they have expected own goals?
Yeah, no, and that's the thing, right? I mean, ultimately it is funny that for as much of a team sport as soccer professes to be, when you make a mistake in this sport, we can go, especially our generation goes all the way back to Roberto Baggio in 1994, skying it over the net against the Brazilians in the World Cup final.
Great reference.
It is one of those things about the sport where you own it. If you make a mistake, it is on you. And, it's one of the peculiarities of the sport, but it's also one of those endearing parts of a very, very, at times, absurd culture. And I mean that in the most affectionate way. Because you might put the kit jersey on for your team and run out with that facing it, but oftentimes when something bad happens, they only remember the name and the number at the back of the jersey.
Scianitti, you're the best man. When I knew that I was going to get the chance on this show today and that we had the game that we did last night, I knew you were going to be on this show as a guest, my friend. So thanks as always for coming on and sharing your expert football knowledge, buddy.
Appreciate you, boys.
TSN's football guy, both versions. Matthew Scianitti. Good points. It really does stick in your craw, the soccer. Some of the.
Well, I just feel bad for Scott Kennedy tonight. Like it's like you're reading the thing. It's like, oh, Canada blew it on an own goal by Scott Kennedy. But like I watched the replay, I didn't think he was really at fault.
No,
but his name's in every story about the game.
Yeah, he's the one that will take the blame. You're right in the record books for the rest of the time.
But I'm it is a weird kind of quirk about how one sport does it one way, the other sport does it the other way. But to Scianitti's point about, it is intriguing now how when you were John Herdman, the inspirational coach of the team that overachieved to get to Qatar,
right,
you were like, you could do no wrong. You had the Midas touch. You were absolutely the savior of this national program. And of course you had the bona fides from the women's team and you got your Olympic podium finishes. Your career was on the uptick and there was all this talk, you were going to get poached.
Yeah.
Suddenly, you have some disappointing results and not wins against the United States, in Las Vegas and on down the line of, we don't even want to get into the bleep Croatia stuff from the World Cup and how he's maybe made himself a distraction. He's under a little bit of fire here if he's not delivering what this team is expected to deliver.
That's the thing. This team is now expected to win. Show it on the pitch in big tournaments against the best nations, and they want that. But it was an interesting conversation with Shanny about the fight and how we saw that from these young guys who aren't at that top level, who aren't amongst the best players in the world, but they showed more fight than some of the guys who are in the last tournament. So, lots of John Herdman talk, lots to consider for the men's national team. But as I say, I just want to keep this soccer momentum going, man, and give it to the women for this Women's World Cup, because this women's team is pretty special as well. Well, you might be surprised that you're listening or watching OverDrive by all this soccer talk, but my name is Brendan Dunlop alongside Dave Feschuk, and we've got the show for the rest of the day. OverDrive is brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. This is OverDrive on the TSN network. You are listening to OverDrive on TSN 1050. You're watching on TSN 4, but I'm not Brian Hayes. I'm Brendan Dunlop. Happy to be alongside Dave Feschuk for the next 2 hours in about 10 minutes' time. It is the summer. I understand that these guys like to enjoy their summer days off. I don't know if they travel together. Do you know that? Do they go on vacations? They spend so much time together at work.
Yeah.
Not a chance.
People used to
grab.
Not a chance. Eh?
That's a big no from
I can
Grappler.
confirm that there has been no traveling done between those three.
Ever.
Okay.
Producer Keith with the confirmation. Okay. How do you think that would go? Like forced travel? What if you took like OverDrive on the road?
Well,
But not just like a big event like one of your golf tournaments that happen to be closer to where you live, right? Have you noticed how convenient that is? That like, oh, we should go on the road because it's closer to where producer Keith lives?
No,
I
not
right?
a chance. No, I mean, they have been on the road together. Like, for years they would attend the NHL drafts.
Of course,
they went to Vegas a handful of years ago as part of a big promotion we did where we actually married a couple. That was called OverDrive Does Vegas, I believe. And yeah, as far as I know, that went fine. It's like they'll travel together, but then they each kind of do their own thing. Like I know in Vegas, I think Hayes was all over the casino, Noodles was just walking around, and O was at the bar. So even if they are traveling someplace together, it doesn't necessarily mean they'll do the same thing together.
Right. They're not going to Punta Cana together. I get that.
Three different charter jets for three different guys, right?
Yeah.
Grappler.
Yeah, I believe that's how it went down.
Yeah. That explains why there's not as much travel as there may have been in the past.
That's right.
I went to Vegas for the Nations League final. I was there for a whole week, so I actually took my 4-month-old son.
Wow.
Yeah. You've got to test them on the plane.
Ambitious.
In general, right?
4 months is young, though, man.
4 months is young. Also, 4 months is young for a place like Vegas, which doesn't have laws against secondhand smoke.
Right.
Right. There's only one place in the at least on the Strip, or one casino, and I wasn't staying there, that is smoke free. So that I wasn't prepared for.
Okay.
Just wheeling the stroller like as fast as possible from the lobby to the elevators, which of course there's a casino floor in between. That I found difficult, but surprisingly, he handled the dry heat really well.
Good for him.
Yeah.
And the flight was he like the bane of the passenger's existence?
Well, no, I was very fearful of that because on my return flight, I know that this was talked about. There were several Canadian players on the flight with me, so I was very hopeful that they would be at the front of the plane and not have to, sit around me and enhancing my pressures.
With Soccer Canada's finances, I was assuming they'd be in middle seats in the back. But
Yeah, that's exactly where they were, Dave.
Right.
They were surrounding me with a baby. So you can imagine my feeling as I, hey, Tejan, hey, Jono, yeah, hey, Jono again. And then they would glance, and then look, oh, my God, he has a baby. And that looks like a young baby. Big baby, but a young baby. He was excellent. And when we got off the plane, Richie LeRae even said, that's a good baby, man. I was like, oh, thank God. I thought he did well, but didn't disturb the guys that reeling from a big loss against the United States.
good for you, buddy. That's gutsy, man.
What age did you take?
I'm getting old, but my little guy, I was always worried. Like every time you're on a plane and your baby's crying, you're like,
Yeah.
You feel bad. Like,
course.
you're like, I'm ruining this flight, but we have to be on this flight, right?
I have to get to a place,
and-
as do these other people.
And trying to console a crying baby, not an easy thing, man.
Yeah.
Like sometimes there's nothing you can do. They just keep crying.
What's the go-to for me then? You got any tips? What's the go-to? You know
I
what?
was into the sort of gently sort of rocking, like the kind of repetitive rocking motion.
Sure. Yeah.
That worked and a lot of shh.
A lot of shush. Yeah. Music guy? Did you go down the lullaby route?
Not on a plane.
No,
That would have been worse. If
Not
I would have started singing on the plane, they would have been saying, could you get the baby to cry again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe you never know. Maybe not. I mean, in general, a plane is like a giant white noise machine,
Yes.
right? So if you can just get the baby to sleep.
That's the thing.
My biggest fear was the ears. I don't know about you when you fly, but when I was a child, it was so excruciating that I got to a point, I don't know, 6 or 8. I'm like, I'm going to grow up and be one of these people like John Madden that has to take a bus.
Right.
I'll never be able to fly. Luckily, with age, that passed. So that was my biggest fear. Actually,
didn't happen.
Was that his ears would pop and he would be in pain.
He was okay.
On the flight up and down, but now he was amazing. Very fearful now that because he's traveled it 4 months, and for what other people tell me is near the next travel. The next travel won't be as easy. So we'll see where I drag him next time. Wherever work takes me.
Good for you.
I guess I'll drive next time. Thanks, man. Thanks. Well, we'll get into plenty more. We'll talk some baseball next. We'll talk some hockey. It is the Major League Baseball All-Star break. So Vladimir Guerrero Jr. in the Home Run Derby, looking for a big second half to the season. Blue Jays fans would hope so, certainly. This is OverDrive on TSN 4 and TSN 1050.